Welcome to Essential Estate Experts, the estate planning podcast and ultimate resource for understanding estate planning and elder law, brought to you by Screenfire Media. Let's get started.
Hey there, folks. Chuck here, and welcome to Essential Estate Experts. We are so excited that you're here today. We talk about family and legacy and preserving generational wealth and taking care of our loved ones after we pass on, all the stuff that we don't want to think about, but we need to think about. I am joined, as I often am, by my co-host, Mr. Mark Zasada. Mark, how are you doing today?
Thanks, Chuck. I'm doing great. I'm really interested in today's show. We have Sabrina Winters with us, who's a well-known speaker on how attorneys should relate to their clients, the disasters that await those who don't do proper planning, and the difficulty in avoiding sibling conflict. We're going to get into all those issues, along with special questions about North Carolina in our continuing effort to cover all the states in the Union.
Before we dive in, I want to do our quick disclaimer. We ask that you please be aware that the information provided on Essential Estate Experts is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Listening to this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Always consult with a qualified lawyer before making any decisions related to legal matters, and do not take legal advice from a podcast. All right, now I'm going to introduce our guest. She hails from Charlotte, North Carolina. Sabrina Winters, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
We're very excited to have you. Now, Sabrina, your firm is called Sabrina Winters Attorney at Law, PLLC. Tell us about how you got into the world of estate planning.
It was a long time ago. Back in 1998, my uncle started to get sick, and then he had dementia, and a lot of things were going wrong. So there was a very small window of time that he could get his affairs in order. He could get a will in place and healthcare powers and all those documents. Well, my uncle was a very kind of fly-by-night kind of guy. He was never really pressed for anything that was making him nervous, or all of his problems were just going to be our problems, essentially. And he was fine with that. And that small window of time came and went very quickly, and to the point where he wasn't mentally able to make his own decisions. Well, what my family had to go through those days that my uncle was sick in the hospital, we weren't guided as his family members. There was fighting amongst family with nothing in writing. The only things the physicians were able to do was to continue to keep him alive, meaning he was resuscitated a couple of times. We needed to wait for my aunt to fly in from Rome, Italy, to make that decision. And unfortunately, fortunately, depends on how you see it, he passed away before she got there. Aftermath of that was very difficult. My father, for 20 some odd years, questioned whether he did the right thing. We all felt that my uncle knew what was going on, but because of his condition, he couldn't communicate. That's why I started my estate planning practice, because we had a heart-wrenching, difficult time before and things that went wrong afterwards because he didn't have a will. And we had to settle his estate with whatever New York said that we had to do, because I was living in New York at the time. And New York decided who got everything. And it was not an easy process. A lot of the ugly comes out of people when they lose loved ones. And that's the focus of my practice, is that families should never go through what my family went through. What happened to us is a prime example of what happens every day when somebody falls ill and there's nothing in writing. That's why my passion is estate planning.
I think people also don't realize how long it can take to settle affairs if there's no will and no trust. You had to go to court, I imagine.
We had to go to court. It was over a year before it was all settled. And New York's filing fees are not cheap. North Carolina's filing fees are very insignificant compared to some of the other states, but it was expensive. And everybody looked to me because I was the law school graduate. I was in the middle of studying for the bar. Even me, having gone through law school and had worked in a law firm since I was 16, it was difficult. We hired a lawyer to help us, and I did a lot of it, but it was just really bad. All the paperwork, the costs, having to deal with family, having to figure out what his assets were. My father took care of him a lot, but my uncle was pretty private about his assets. Finding what he had later was difficult. So it was about a year and a half before it was all finally settled.
Wow.
Yeah, I hear that more than 50% of people die without a will in America. Do you see that all the time, I imagine?
A big part of my practice is settling estates. From my experience with the clients I've had over the last 20 years, I probably have settled estates for families more without anything in writing.
Wow.
Mm.
The other thing I think people don't realize is the arguments that can take place among family afterwards. I'm sure you see a lot of that. And that a goal, really an important goal of estate planning, is to prevent arguments after you're gone, right?
It's the primary goal. A lot of what
Mhm.
you do for estate planning is that final gift you give family. It's the final, I want everything to be as easy as possible for you. I don't want your last memory of me to be this horrible experience through court. Oftentimes, when clients see it that way, they really understand it's important for me to get this done. It's about the gift I leave my family of to mourn or celebrate my life and not have to be consumed like my family was. With pretty much immediately after he died, we were on top of having to figure things out for his estate. Families shouldn't have to do that. The way I've structured my firm, which I think is really important to point out, every lawyer is going to handle their business differently. They're going to handle their day-to-day affairs differently. A lot of the things I learned was disorganization is not the optimal way to have a life. And so a lot of how we plan with our clients from the minute they become clients through the whole process is that we have specific steps and procedures that we require all our clients to go through. And there's steps to make sure that they know what their assets are. I've got clients that have come to me that I ask questions about their assets. They left their job 10 years ago and there's a 401k with the company. They've never seen a statement. They don't even know who the beneficiaries are. I had another client whose spouse passed and the spouse did all of the asset things, paid bills, balanced checkbooks, spoke to the advisor, and she was completely lost without him around. We've created procedures to make sure that every step of the way you're getting yourself organized. Clients need to know the end result of not planning, and why not share my story? It's true.
Talk to us about the proper relationship between an attorney and their client in all of this. I think too many people think about the relationship as a simple transaction. You go in, you get your documents done, you're finished, you never need to talk to this person again. What's the right way to approach this?
I agree. The end result is you've got the tangible documents, but if those aren't created correctly, the estate plan is not going to work. And how do you get those documents to reflect what the client really wants? And it's really getting to understand what the client's fears are, concerns for family and children. Clients dictate the type of plan, and without talking things through, asking the initial questions and the follow-up questions and the follow-up questions, there's no way you're going to possibly create a plan that's going to work for them. You have to get to know your clients. It's not like someone's going to call me and say, can you go to court on a traffic ticket? That's a one-off. That's transactional planning, right? With estate planning, it's not transactional. It's relationship based. Because when there's a life event with that client in the future, they need to know that they can call you and why they need to call you. Is there a divorce amongst your spouse with your children's spouses? Did you have a divorce? Is there an illness? Did you get another job with different benefits, more pay at the minimum to your estate planning attorney so that you can make sure whether you need to change your plan or not?
I know you have a talk about building trust with clients. When I went out to do this, my wife says, I don't trust lawyers. I want to use an online service. So a lot of people don't trust lawyers. And a lot of people don't understand the role. And there's things people don't tell you that they should because they don't trust you. Does that happen?
Not to me a lot. Always tell my clients at the beginning of the meeting, this is confidential. Nothing leaves this room. I am not permitted to tell anybody anything about what happens in this meeting unless they're under the same confidentiality. So if you need to tell me something about your child, they're never going to know. And so we try to let them know. The more you share with us that you are comfortable sharing with us, the better your plan is going to be. For example, if you don't share with me that you have a child who might be on drugs or maybe in rehab right now, I may not have suggested that there's some language you need to put in your documents that will protect their assets or even themselves from their own financial harm. The more you tell me, the better your plan is going to be. So I do my best at the beginning to assure them to be as comfortable as they can, because it's not going to go anywhere. And that's why they hold back sometimes. And some it's embarrassment. Not that I would think they should be embarrassed, but they feel like they should be embarrassed about sharing something.
Yeah, they don't know what the factors are that you need to consider.
Right.
So they need to tell you everything. They don't know what's important, what's not important.
And it's the attorney's job to ask the right questions. If you're just asking basic everyday questions, you're going to get very basic answers from your clients. So my meetings are run conversationally. I ask them why they decided to call me. Why now? What have you been nervous about? What happened that you decided to pick up the phone and schedule time with me? Because a lot of clients say, oh, it's kind of been on my mind for a long time. But yes, that I understand. But what just happened that made you do that? And 95% of the time, it was something that happened in their life. It might have been they read about somebody dying without a will, or their neighbor lost their spouse and they see how horrible their life is with settling their estate. Something has happened to cause you to call somebody like me. I find out a lot about what they're afraid of. I'm afraid to leave my wife in that kind of a situation. Or we have a disabled child at home and I don't know what's going to happen to them. I need to make sure that they're okay. Being less lawyerly and more personable with clients, you get a lot more, what is the saying? You get a lot more
flies with honey than with vinegar.
That's right. And it's true. The more confident clients feel that they're comfortable with you, the more you're going to get from them and the better their plan is going to be and the better off their family is going to be. Because you need to remind them the reason you're here taking this really difficult step. Because let's face it, nobody wants to talk about their death or illness, but we have to. And the more comfortable you make your client, the more understanding you are as a human, the better off it's going to be, because they're doing it for their family. And oftentimes we need to remind clients, don't forget, you're doing this for your family and it's a wonderful thing. Imagine how much harder it could be for them when you don't take the time to do it now.
Don't realize that a good lawyer's job is to prevent conflict,
Yes,
not explore it or cause it. Any good lawyer is thinking about that, especially in estate planning.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we've created a lot of things beyond the estate plan. I created a journal for them to write stories down, things that maybe kids don't remember. It's the end that you're leaving them with, and a legacy planner. You have to make sure that your family knows what your assets are, knows all the important information, like what goes on a death certificate. If you've never been to a funeral home, there is at least 100 questions that they ask you. And you probably are not going to know that if it's a parent. A lot of that information isn't shared. We go beyond the end where we've executed and we've gone through this big relationship. We go beyond that because now you have to be organized. Now you have to communicate to your family during a time you can't communicate. Well, we want you to write these things down. That's the goal.
That's well put. We really want to get to North Carolina and the special issues there might be in that state.
How is North Carolina different? I live in California. If I were moving out to North Carolina, what would I need to know?
The one thing that you have to look at is property. California has community property laws. We don't. So the distribution of assets are different. Here in North Carolina, a spouse needs to sign off on some document when it comes to their spouse inheriting or even buying a piece of land. They can create a document beforehand. I think it's called a free trader agreement, or they sign off at that time if they're not going to also be an owner. And I think that comes up often in my meetings because they say, well, I don't want my daughter's son to be part of anything that I leave, especially the home. And I tell them, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to talk to your kids and you need to tell them when they get an inheritance, don't add your spouse's name to it. Keep it completely separate. Maybe another option is a prenup or a postnuptial agreement. Get it in writing. None of it's yours. There's things that you can educate family on what to do. So those are the two things I can think off of the top of my head that would probably be different from state to state.
Let me ask you, in North Carolina, does a will have a lot of force, or do you have to have a living trust?
It depends on what the client's plan is. When you do a will, it's really just a wish. These are your wishes that you want people to follow when you die. Somebody has to be appointed at the court to grant you your wishes, and that's the executor. And if an asset doesn't have beneficiaries on it or a joint owner, there could be a process in court. So I tell all my clients, let's get what you want in writing, but we also have to realize we need to grant your wishes. And if it's executed correctly, it's going to be submitted to the court and approved, and then your executor can step in and distribute those assets exactly the way you want them to be.
What's the estate tax situation in North Carolina?
Every state has some form of an estate tax law, right? So whatever that limit is, your estate won't have to pay any estate taxes. New York had one. When I left, it was $1 million. My understanding is that it probably is $1 million. It's not very high before you have your estate pays an estate tax without proper planning. Well, in North Carolina, we had one, we don't anymore. If there's a federal estate tax, that's what you're dealing with. And that has to be incorporated into documents. And so here in North Carolina, my point is a lot of people do trusts not for tax planning purposes. They do it to avoid probate. It's for the clients who want to keep their assets private, want assets to pass quicker, and they want to keep legal fees down after they pass away. They don't want that burden on their family. So those are the three reasons, which really is, I want to stay out of probate. I want my family to stay out of probate. That's who should have a trust, those people with that level of a concern.
It's quite different. Actually, in California here, you get the advice that everyone needs a trust. But I think possibly because the probate process is difficult and long here. How long does it take to go through probate in North Carolina, and how does that look?
So it's different county to county. We have not had e-filings here, at least in the counties I practice in. I don't think any county in North Carolina has had them until the middle of 2023. So each county is starting, I think they like groups of whatever it is every few months with e-filings. Things were horribly going wrong. And then when everybody came back, they were struggling to get back on track for everything that came through during COVID, because people are still dying. People are still needing access to assets. That COVID didn't stop that. And it took a very long time. It could take 2 years to fully close, to fully distribute. Some of them have taken 18 months to 2 years. Now with some of the counties with the e-filing, it's smoother. And they're taking only about 6 to 8 weeks now. They can send it to you via email and you submit it online. They don't need the originals. They still need the original wills, but everything else is e-filed. So my hope is now that it's an easier submission process. It's not going to take a long time, but 6 to 8 weeks to get an appointment for a client to be the executor is too long. They need money. Some of them are going out of pocket to pay for funeral expenses because you can't walk out of a funeral home without giving a credit card or signing over a life insurance. You have to pay. And you also have to dispose of the body. You don't have the option to wait on any of that. And they come to me, they're like, well, we don't have any more money. I can only push this through. Once it's with the court, it's out of my hands. A fantastic option, and the option that most should take to stay out of probate. It's the option that usually is best fit for clients. We educate our clients. I tell them you can avoid some of this if you do beneficiary designations, if it makes sense for you. It's not for everybody to use beneficiary designations. So I think it's up to the attorney to, after you've had that long conversation of getting to know them, is to then explain to them what their personal options are, because it's going to be different with the next client.
Let's just be clear to everybody. Explain in 3 sentences what a trust is, what a beneficiary designation is, and how those things are different for those who don't know.
Well, I can define a trust by comparing it with a will. They are both documents that set forth your wishes for what you want to happen after you die, about your assets primarily. If you have minors, then you're going to talk about a guardian and a trustee for them. The best way I can explain a trust is if you have a bucket, you're going to put things in there. Maybe your checking account, maybe your savings account, maybe an investment account. You're going to take those out of your name and you're going to put them into the name of the trust bucket. Now your trust is holding all of your assets. The trustee is going to come in, manage this for you, and start pouring out of that bucket into the hands of your beneficiaries. A beneficiary designation, when I say that, it's typically one that you do at your life insurance company or your financial institutions. They're going to give you a form and you're going to write down the name of the person that you want. It trumps what your trust says, but oftentimes you don't need the beneficiary designation anymore because now you put it in your trust and it doesn't matter. It's very hard to have a client understand what a trust is if you've not gone through the process yet. So I don't like to tell clients all those little details at the beginning because they'll get very confused, overwhelmed, and they'll never be able to make a decision. But as we move through the steps of the process, they're going to start to understand how it works, what they need to do to make it work at the end, and why I'm asking all those questions.
And I think people can understand why they need someone to guide them through this process. Those are really important decisions. Educating yourself is a very difficult thing. Lawyers go to school for this to get it straight. And it's difficult to understand what's important for you to know before you make a decision like that. What about after someone passes away? Do people need a lawyer usually in North Carolina?
So North Carolina doesn't require that you have a lawyer to assist you. Do I say, yes, you should? Absolutely. Absolutely. In our court system here, if you do it on your own and you're not represented, they'll always tell you, we can't give you legal advice. And so what they've done is they've created a pamphlet. When you're doing it alone, they give you the pamphlet. A lot of the things that they need to know are not in there. They don't know that they need to know it because they're not in there. A lot of the things that you are not told in the pamphlet, if you do them wrong, it's hard to undo them to then do it correct. The legal fee is probably more to step in the middle of somebody handling it themselves because there's so much undoing you have to do. Not only do you have to do the process and help them, but you have to correct the things that went south that they didn't do correctly themselves.
Can you give an example of a situation where something has to get undone?
So one of the files that I had, they started the process by themselves and they started transferring assets to themselves, but there were multiple beneficiaries. So what do you think is going to happen when you give a beneficiary an asset and then you tell them, well, you have to give it back because it has to be divided, and those beneficiaries don't want you to have it? So we couldn't get the beneficiaries to agree to let this executor have that asset. He had to put it back into the estate and distribute it equally. Without that agreement, we were unable to get this smoothed out and where we wanted it to, and he had to put the money back in.
Wow.
Because until he came to me, he thought he was allowed to do it. And that happens a lot.
What are some of the common mistakes people make after someone dies? There's a lot of important things that have to happen.
A lot.
People must make a lot of mistakes.
And I hate to call them mistakes because making a mistake would probably assume you knew what to do and you did it wrong. Nobody knows what to do. They're on the internet trying to find information, trying to piece it together. They're asking their neighbor what they should do when you were in that situation. And it's different between everybody. Every estate is going to have something different that's going to cause a different outcome. It could be something that the will said. Maybe they didn't have anything in writing. Now North Carolina dictates who gets the assets. So the first biggest mistake is thinking that they don't need help and not going to see an attorney for at least initial guidance. That to me is the first big mistake.
Dad dies and they start driving his car and living in his house. Is it legal to do that without a process in place? What happens?
It depends on if there was a will or a trust, what those documents may have said. And if there's no will or trust, then North Carolina is going to tell us what can happen. So it could be okay and it could be not okay.
Give me a common scenario when someone passes away and there's 3 siblings. What kind of arguments can happen? What can go wrong in those moments?
Oh, you name it. People change after the passing of somebody. Kids change. They all got along when mom and dad were alive. Now they're gone. Now they can't stand each other. Now they only just want the stuff and they want to move on. And so they're all fighting. I have seen fights over the littlest tangible property, the littlest piece of furniture. Mom always promised me the dining room set. You can't sell it. It's mine. Oftentimes it's not about the actual thing. It's about, I just hate you. And I'm just going to make this difficult for you. There's only so much you can do to control a child. I've seen a lot of petty things. I had one client who it literally was the china set. But in that child's mind, I have to get that set because I'm not the boss of this estate and I'm just going to give him a hard time. I don't represent beneficiaries. I represent fiduciaries of the estate, so an executor. So I can't counsel a beneficiary. They have to get their own lawyer and figure it out themselves between lawyer to lawyer. But it's been and I don't mean to minimize what a china set is because emotional value, it could be priceless, right? But in this particular situation, that beneficiary could care less about it. They didn't care. They just wanted something to argue over because of emotions, stupid stuff. But it happened.
And a lot of times these siblings they're in their 50s or 60s, right? They're approaching retirement themselves often.
They're traditional adults who've had adult life things happen to them, and they should handle this in the proper manner. But a lot of the beneficiaries are not adults at that age. We've got a lot of beneficiaries that are in their 20s losing both parents. And they're just trying to figure out their own life. They're still trying to get that job going, figure out where they want to live and how to balance a checkbook because it's their first job. And now they don't even know what to do. So sadly, there's a lot of young people. We go on the premise that we don't know tomorrow is not promised for any of us. And that's how I end all my videos. Plan today, you're going to lose that opportunity.
I'm the father of 2 small children, and it's something that I know everybody should be thinking about: your estate plan, your will, your living trust, that sort of thing. But I'm curious, because I'm sure you deal with a lot of the same questions over and over and over again. If there was a way for you to get in front of people before they picked up the phone and called you, what is the one thing that you would make sure they knew before they picked up the phone to call an estate planning lawyer?
I would tell them exactly what I just said. Don't wait to pick up the phone. Pick up the phone today because tomorrow is not promised for any of us.
Start the process, get a guide to the process.
Do it. Just do it because you can't undo not doing it after you're gone. And then whatever damage is the damage. And your kids are going to have to live with that burden you left with them. That 99% of parents don't want that. 99% of my clients don't want to leave that burden to their kids or their siblings, whoever's going to be helping them with the estate. Just do it. That's it. Think of it this way. We have car insurance, right? For the what if I get into an accident. You have homeowners insurance. What if my house catches on fire or there's a flood? But many people don't see estate planning as the same thing. The biggest difference, it's not the what if, it's the when. It's the one insurance you are going to need. You may never need your car insurance or homeowners insurance. You're going to need your estate plan because it's the one thing none of us can avoid, and that's dying.
That's a great analogy. I never heard that before.
It's the best analogy because almost Everybody's had to pay month after month for years on car insurance. Total all of that up. It pales in comparison to the costs and the stress and the anxiety of you thinking of all these horrible things. You can't even compare it. Then add on the homeowner's insurance. And if you don't have homeowner's insurance, add on that renter's insurance or the health insurance. All these things that you don't total it. You don't have a running total in front of you of all of the fees that you've paid. When you do that, you look to see why you're waiting to do an estate plan. It makes no sense. But that's the lawyer's job. It's the attorney's job to help everybody understand the dangers of not having it. Now, that's on our plate too, to educate the community, which is what I try to do.
Speaking of educating the community, tell folks a little bit about the talks that you do and where they could find you and get more information from you.
Yeah. My passion is my estate planning business and firm. I've been doing that here in North Carolina since 2005. And so I'm called in oftentimes to real estate companies where I sit in front of their agents and explain to them the importance of estate planning, how to build trust and confidence with their clients in having the right referral sources for the right reasons, teaching them that this is a big asset for their clients, and really just teaching the whole process of what do you need now. I speak at churches. I'm a guest speaker oftentimes at community events. I spoke a lot, several years at St. Matthew's Catholic Church, which is one of the biggest Catholic churches in the United States, speaking to the congregation about planning. And we talk about cremation and burial and all of those things because the funeral home is there. I also go into financial institutions, either whether it's their annual conference or their monthly meetings, and talk to them about how important it is to have a relationship with your clients and really think outside of the box, because we're doing a service for our clients and it shouldn't end with what we can personally do. You have to build trust, build confidence with your clients. And how do you do that? You have to tell them they need an estate plan, the CPA that they're working with. You have to tell them all these things because we're their confidants. We're the ones that need to tell them what they need because they don't know. And that's our job. So I do speaking engagements. I do a lot of volunteer speaking engagements, and a lot I am paid for to go in and train on how estate planning is so important, and it touches almost every business in the community.
Outstanding. And where can people find you? Where's your website and all that information?
So my website is ncestateplaninginfo.com. I am on TikTok and Instagram. You can just search my name, Sabrina Winters. And I have a YouTube channel as well where we've got all of our educational videos on there. And that's North Carolina Estate Planning. I have all my videos there. And of course, the website has a lot of great information. It also has a risk assessment that people can take. They take that risk assessment and it shows them whether their family's protected or not. And if their family's not protected, they need a plan. The majority that come through, people are at risk.
I bet.
That was fabulous. And thank you so much, Sabrina Winters in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Mark, for having me on. I think it's a great platform for the community to really understand how important this is. Just make sure you do your planning. You have to plan today for your families tomorrow. Don't be scared of it.
Well said.
Don't be scared of it. Those are great words.
Thanks again to Sabrina Winters for being on the show. And of course, all of that information will be linked in our show notes. And while you're down there, make sure that you are subscribed. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like. It really helps spread the word about the show. Rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting app. As always, we appreciate you being here today. We'll be back again soon with another episode of Essential Estate Experts. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to Essential Estate Experts, presented by Screenfire Media. Please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube, and rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. For more information, please visit screenfiremedia.com. Essential Estate Experts is copyright Screenfire Media, all rights reserved.